Hello and welcome back to episode 3 of The Betting Heat, a series where we take the big race of the weekend and analyse it. I've done things slightly differently this time round. I had an interview with Harry Cobden that I recorded earlier on in the week, and then at a later date I filmed with Adam Mills where we talked about the Grade 1 long walk hurdle at Ascot. So what you're going to see first is my interview with Harry Cobden, and then you'll see my conversation with Adam Mills. Also, I got some questions answered that you guys asked me on Twitter, so if you don't already, do check me out at Racing Willow. So let's get straight into the conversation with Harry Cobden. Okay, so it's time for question time, and I'm joined with jockey Harry Cobden. How are you doing, Harry?
Yeah, no, very well, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to go through some questions. I've also got some questions from you guys as well. So we'll kick things off. The first one I've got is the Nichols team has started the season really strongly this year. Has there anything you've done differently this year to previous years, or have you just got a better string of horses?
I think we managed to get good and fit early, and obviously we had a good start in October, and the horses have been in great form ever since. I think sort of through November I rode 24 winners for Paul, and they're still running well now. So they'll obviously quieten down just after Christmas when they have their flu jab, but delighted with how everything's going so far, and hopefully long may it continue.
Is that what you do every year then? So start the season strongly, flu jab into the new year, and then go back up for March?
Yeah, I mean, normally we have a sort of a slowish part in the beginning to middle of December. November's obviously very good. October's normally very good. Hopefully peak on sort of around Christmas with a few Boxing Day runners and New Year's Day runners, and then everything gets a flu jab. We have a quiet January, and then February we're going strong again.
What's your relationship like with Nico de Boinville as a fan of the combination? You obviously have Cobden versus de Boinville, Nichols versus Henderson. We've had the big matchup only last year, Altior versus Surname. Is it a competitive relationship, or are you good friends?
Look, Nico's a really down-to-earth, genuine bloke. He's very fair as well, and I suppose he's good to ride against. He's obviously a very good jockey, and he's got a great record, hasn't he? And to be honest, we get on really well, and he'd be one of the people I really like in the weighing room.
We look back at recent years, and you look at Nichols' top jockey. Obviously, you had Ruby Walsh not too long ago, and Sam Twiston-Davies as well. Did you ever think at this point in your career you'd be put your name alongside theirs?
No. I suppose when I was sort of 13 or 14, I wanted to go there and sort of ride if I could, and maybe probably go amateur. And if I was good enough, I was good enough. But since I got into racing, really, when I was 16, it was the ball got rolling very early. I had a good point-to-pointing season, and then turn condition and rode 35 winners my first season, and then it progressively got better after that. And I've been fortunate. I've been in the few lucky scenarios. You know, my first ever ride in a Grade 1 was on Irving, and he won the Fighting Fifth. And I was lucky that I was in the sort of right place at the right time, if you know what I mean.
Mm. I've got to ask you. We've obviously got the big Boxing Day clashes coming up soon. Surname versus Clan de Zobo, in your eyes, was this something that, like, is this all your own choice, or has Nichols pointed you one way to, obviously you've picked Surname at this point?
Look, I wanted to ride Surname at Wetherby, and he obviously won well there. I think Surname's probably the best horse in the country. Some people may or may not agree, but I think he's probably the best horse that I'd ever ridden anyway. When he's on his day, he's very, very hard to beat.
What
obviously,
was that? No, go on.
Obviously, Clan de Zobo is a two-time King George winner, so to get off a two-time King George winner to some people would be mad, wouldn't it? But I think if Surname turns up, it'll be hard to get by.
What were your thoughts following last year's King George? Obviously, I imagine you had the same choice last year as this year between Surname and Clan de Zobo. Was it gutting, really?
It's obviously a tough pill to swallow, isn't it? But I knew he wasn't right after I jumped a couple of fences, and I think I take days like that pretty well. I've had it happen a good few times now, so you've just got to move on and try and put it right.
I want to ask a couple other questions about horses at the Nichols team. I'll start off with McFabulous. Is the plan to carry on with him in the Stayers Hurdle?
Do you know, I'm not 100% sure what the plan is, but I just thought that race at Newbury was a little bit of a mess. The last day they went no gallop, and he just hung a little bit right as well. So which is slightly unlike him. So yeah, it was obviously frustrating not to win the race, but considering all that went wrong, I know it was the same for the other horses, but whatever. But considering they went no gallop, considering he was hanging and probably wasn't quite, I don't know, he wasn't quite at his best because he doesn't normally hang. So I think we'd be mad not to try and go for the Stayers.
You unleashed a really exciting novice hurdler in Brave Man's Game. Where do you think he could go next, and where do you think he could go in the future?
I'm not sure where he goes next, but I suppose looking towards Cheltenham, he won't run in the Albert Bartlett. I think he's more of a Ballymore horse. So that'll be his route this year. I would have thought that he's a big, beautiful horse. He jumps well. He's got loads of class, and I'd say he's probably the best novice hurdler I've sat on in my sort of few years at Ditchit. I know we haven't had one that's sort of gone round like him. He's definitely a horse for the future as well, and you know, whatever he does over hurdles would be a bonus because he jumps so well. We've already scored him over little fences, and you know that'll be his game next season.
That is quite the statement, to be fair. Best novice hurdler you've sat on at Ditchit. I saw a video of Megan Nichols. This was going back a few years, and when they said they'd obviously just got Brave Man's Game, and she pointed him at one for the future. He's sort of guessing throughout his whole time at the yard. He's been one you've been keeping an eye on.
Yeah, well, we've always liked him. As soon as he came into the yard, he went into box one, so that'll tell you something.
Definitely. Master Tommy Tucker is another one as well, before I get onto some questions from the crowd. He obviously was a bit of a disappointment last week. He's been held in high regard throughout his whole career. How's he come out the race, and is everything okay with him?
Yeah, I was delighted with him at Cheltenham.
Really?
I know he didn't win, but he jumped really sharp. You know, he's only had sort of 7 or 8 runs in his life, and I think a race like that would sort of it's probably copped him on a little bit. 17-runner handicap around Cheltenham, you've got to be on your A game. He jumped well. He had lots and lots of weight on his back in ground that he probably didn't like. It was sort of soft, dead, horrible, tacky ground. You know, that run at Haydock probably wasn't too long ago. He had a harder race than we anticipated, I think, and I think he'll bounce back and Paul will get him to win a big one by the end of the season.
Brilliant. That's good to hear, because I'm a big fan of Master Tommy Tucker. From a punting perspective, he was been quite frustrating to follow. He obviously fell a fair few times. So he's had a wind up going into this year. Do you think that sort of put him straight and narrow? Do you reckon that was the issue with him?
I don't know. Look, he does make the odd mistake now and again, but he actually jumps quite well. He just makes a silly error at the back end of the race and seems to end up on the floor. But, you know, touch wood, the last 3 times he's ran, he's completed and he's going the right way.
That's brilliant. So I've got a few questions here from Twitter. One was from John Francis, and he was asking, who's the best novice chaser you've ridden this season?
Oh, who is the best novice chaser? I've been probably Hitman. He hasn't had very many runs. He was very impressive when he won at Foss first time out, and then he obviously got beat by All Mankind in the Henry VIII the weekend before last. So he's big, and I think he's a horse that will strengthen up with another summer out at grass, and he'll definitely be competitive in those big graded races in years to come.
It's good to hear. I had a friend of mine put him up last year. I think for the Boodles, the Fred Winter, and he didn't go in the end. But yeah, it's good that he's an exciting horse. So would the plan be with him the Arkle, or is it sort of just the long game with him?
Um, if all goes well and Paul's happy with him in March, I would have thought he may run in an Arkle.
Brilliant. The next one I've got is from Todd Stanley, and he wants to know, of all the horses that came over from Willie Mullins, who are you most excited about?
Real Steel, I think Real Steel will come on for his last run at Ascot. He ran well, got beaten by Imperial Alcazar or whatever it's called, Aura or
Imperial Aura, yeah.
And look, I thought he ran okay. He missed the last down the back. Probably had a little blow between the second last and last. He'll come on from the run. He's going to go for the King George. Hopefully, he won't beat me, and I'm sure he'll be competitive in a good graded race in the spring somewhere.
The last question I've got for you is from Jack Mendleton, and he wanted to know, what is your favourite winner you've ridden so far this season?
Oh, my favourite winner so far this season, probably Grenadine in the Holden Gold Cup.
Yeah? You still keep full faith in him after finishing behind Politolog in the Tingle Creek?
Yeah, I think one day he'll want 2.5 miles. He probably hasn't got the speed and class as Politolog just yet, but look, he's only 6 years old. He's still improving. His run at Sandown was rock solid the other day, wasn't it? And he's definitely a horse that's going to pick up a real nice race before the end of the season.
Brilliant. So that has been question time with Harry Cobden. Thank you very much for coming on. He's obviously finished a whole day riding around at Wincanton at the point of recording, so he must be exhausted. So I have to thank him for coming on. Okay, so it's time to talk about the big betting heat of the weekend, and I'm going to be joined by punter Adam Mills. How are you doing, Adam?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you, Will. I'm doing all right.
He was joined with us on the first week. Did a fantastic job, so I thought I'd get him back. We're going to be looking at the first grade 1 of the betting heat, and we're going to be looking at the Long Walk Hurdle. I imagine this race could lead us to possibly getting the winner of the Stayers Hurdle, so that would be very exciting to talk about. And I think we should start by talking about the one at the head of the market, Time Hill. It did get the better of Paisley Park on the last day at Newbury. He was getting some weight, and the race was sort of falsely run, as Harry Cobden spoke about in just 10 minutes earlier. What's your thoughts on Time Hill?
Well, he's the coming force. If you said to me, you've got to back one of these horses to win the Stayers Hurdle, it would be Time Hill. He is the unexposed one. He's only 6, rising 7. The Albert Bartlett form, I think, is absolutely rock solid. You have to look at the likes of Fury Road and Monkfish and what they're doing this season to see that. I agree, looking at the sectional times that I look at a lot, Harry Cobden's right. It was relatively slowly run, but what pleased me most about Time Hill is that wouldn't have suited Time Hill particularly well either. And the argument it was falsely run is kind of question marked by the fact that Fabulous blatantly didn't stay, which if it was falsely run kind of confuses me as to why would a horse who's got loads of form over 2.5 not stay the 3 miles in falsely run. When they jumped 3 out, Paisley Park was doing his usual and hitting a flat spot, but Time Hill just quickened up beautifully. And at no point did I ever think Time Hill was going to get beat in that race. I didn't back him. I didn't get involved in it. But I just think if he can do that first time out when a lot of the Hobbs horses have needed the run, what's he going to be like now? The big question mark for me is the weather. It's currently soft ground at Ascot. There is quite a bit of rain forecast. If this turned heavy, that would lead me to come and take on Time Hill purely because he's never been in open company in heavy ground in the middle of December. So it's a real stamina test at Ascot when that happens, as it did last year. But I think if you like Time Hill for this, you have to back him for the Stayers Hurdle now. He's around about a 5-6 to 1 shot for the Stayers Hurdle. If he bulks up in this, he's going to probably be 7 to 2, maybe 3 to 1. He's probably the most likely winner if the ground stays as it is at the moment. I really would be quite happy to take the 2 to 1 that's there.
I love this because when I've done them with people previously, we've always landed on sort of the same thoughts, and I have literally as far away from that opinion as possible. I sort of believe that the falsely run race suited him more than it would have suited Paisley Park, and he was also getting £3 that day. And I mean that's not anything major, but in the grand scheme of things, Paisley Park was only beaten about a length. and was staying on all the way to the finish. And I think the falsely run race most probably suited Time Hill more than it suited Paisley Park. Paisley Park does really need a strong gallop, which is why he excels in the big championship races. He obviously rides behind the bridle a little bit and always hits that flat spot and stays on, which I think a course like Ascot or Cheltenham obviously really suits him. I think in a really well-run race, providing the ground doesn't come up heavy, I'd be seeing Paisley Park reverse the form with Time Hill. And I also think the same as you, I'd be getting on Paisley Park for the Stayers Hurdle now about 6-1. I think that's probably the bet of the race for me. Although we both do agree that if the ground does come up heavy, there's every chance that the pair of them could just not turn up at all. What's your thoughts on Paisley Park?
Well, it's unusual for me. I don't do this a lot, but I've laid Paisley Park.
Ooh.
I've managed to lay him at 3.3 on the Betfair Exchange, and I thought it was pretty fair. The reason I've laid him is, well, twofold. Firstly, I remember back to this time last year, he'd won the long distance hurdle at Newbury. He was about 1 to 3 favourite for this, and on the middle of the week, it turned heavy ground, and Emma Lavelle pulled him out. So I thought, well, if it turns heavy ground again, there's every chance he may not run, because particularly with his fibrillating heart problem, whether they're going to take the risk with him or not on really testing deep Ascot ground, I'm not so sure. So that was one reason for laying him, that I thought I might get an angle into the race. But the other reason for laying him is I just think when you actually start to look back at his form, since he won the Stayers in 2019, I look back through his actual form this morning and you start to question it. He beat Thistlecrack in the long distance hurdle at Newbury by around about 3 lengths. Thistlecrack is not what he was for whatever reason, but he's not. Then he won a pretty poor renewal of the Cleve Hurdle. Now, lots of people keep saying to me, oh, well, if you look at the Cleve Hurdle, Paisley Park beat Lisnagar Oscar, and that came out and won the Stayers. But I think in the benefit of time, now when you look at that Stayers Hurdle in particular, you start to look and think, well, Lisnagar Oscar wasn't all that great. It was a pretty poor renewal of the Stayers. So I think there's a lot of holes in Paisley's form. The other thing I felt about his ride at Newbury, it felt to me like they wanted to get him through the race. And if he'd have come 6th, they wouldn't have bothered them. They weren't interested in winning it. Aidan Coleman was clearly given the instructions. Let's get him into the home straight and see what you've got left. Now, as it turned out, he was maybe not as good as ever, but he did the exact same thing he's always done. About 3 or 4 furlongs from home, he hits that flat spot and then he goes again and he quickens up. But when you look at it, if you watch the race just from the final furlong to the line, at no point is he catching Time Hill. Their sectional times for that final stretch are almost identical. I just don't see how he can possibly reverse the form. Now, this might look stupid on Monday if Paisley Park has done Time Hill by 7 lengths, but I'm more than happy to lay him because, one, I'm not even sure he'll run if it turns heavy. And secondly, I think if this turned into a real slog, I'm not sure they're going to bottom him out. So I'll be more than happy. He's the one that I really want to take on, which sounds strange because I love the horse, but I think at the moment there's enough question marks for me to want to take him on at around 2 to 1 rather than back him.
We are recording this on a Wednesday night, so this is a sort of an anti-post look at it. With the 2 at the head of the market, both of them are sort of like 2 to 1, 9 to 4 shots, or even 15 to 8. So they're taking up a large chunk of the market. I'm imagining right now that there's going to be some good each way value, especially with the expected non-runners or possible non-runners to the 2 at the head of the market. I've got Main Fact who follows them up in the market. This horse doesn't really stop winning. He's won 6 races over hurdles. I think he won 2 or 3 on the flat in the meantime. Rose from a mark of 98 to 154, and they will be praying for the rain, won't they? He ran at Haydock on what was most probably quite bottomless ground and won a grade 3 handicap. Do you think he has a chance, or do you think this is just one step too far for him?
I think he's got a definite chance. I'm a bit annoyed, really. At the start of the week, he was much bigger. He was around 9, 10 to 1. I sort of left it alone. Thought, oh, we'll leave that, see how the race develops. But if you think about it, this time last year, he got beat off a mark of 98 at Exeter. I mean, you must feel like the unluckiest mug in the world if you happen to back him on that day and he got turned over. But 9 in the spin. And last time at Haydock, they stepped him up to 3 miles and he stayed forever. He, to me, looks like he'll be a magnificent staying chaser if they ever go that route in the future. I think David Pike must be doing a rain dance right now. He must be thinking, if this turns into a slog, we've got a right chance. I don't think Main Fact is the quickest horse in the world. if you look at particularly his runs on the flat where they've been taking advantage of the low marks, at no point does he come sprinting past them with a furlong to go. But what he is a grinder. He can maintain a nice strong gallop. He'll definitely get a gallop in here. However many runners there are, it's going to be run to suit. At around 9-2 now, probably the value has gone. I definitely want to back him each way because I don't think come March he's going to be a main contender for the stayers. I think he's much more of a handicap horse who's maybe taking advantage of an opportunity, but I can definitely see the angle. And if it really heavily rained, he would tempt me.
I sort of tend to avoid horses that are on long winning streaks. I more lean to the side of there's a higher chance that they're going to end that streak than continue it. And I think this is going to be obviously one step too far, jumping from grade 3 handicap into a grade 1. I just think as well, the same as you, that price has vanished. He's no longer an each way bet for me at 9-2. I think I could more than happily see him place and fill the frame or even win at those odds. It would be quite the story, but I wouldn't be siding with him at all. Roxana is a horse, the only mare in the field, and she is around the same sort of price. And I think she has a really good chance. I actually relatively unexposed over 3 miles with only 3 goes over the trip. She's finished second twice and won once most recently. That was on her last run. I think she's been overlooked in this field. I think there's about 13-2 around for her in some places. Her last run, when you take into account the £7, she's effectively rated about 160, which puts her bang up there with both Time Hill and Paisley Park. With her last run, she got an RPR of 155. Again, when you add the £7, that means she ran to a mark of 162, which is around the same mark that both Time Hill and Paisley Park ran on their last run at Newbury. She won't mind the conditions at all. She's got form on soft ground. I think she'd rather it be soft than good. And I don't think they've reached the ceiling with her over this distance. What's your thoughts on Roxana?
It's a funny horse, really. It's sort of, for a while, I think she was pigeonholed because she won the Mayor's Hurdle when Benny Dadu threw it away at the last. So she then spent a year sort of struggling to live up to that reputation of being a Grade 1 winner. But you can't help but be impressed by how she ran at Wetherby. When you think Next Destination was in second and the brilliant performance he put up and going, albeit going over fences, but that form looks relatively rock solid. She gets the £7 mare's allowance. I can definitely see the angle. Again, though, I would rather take, if she was 10-1, I could see her as a bet, but at 6s, I don't think there's any each way value in it. I question with her, would she really want very heavy ground? She's definitely got form on soft, but again, if it was really heavy and testing, I'm not sure. I think 3 miles is the absolute limit of her stamina. 3 miles round Wetherby on relatively decent, good to soft is a world of difference between 3 miles up the Ascot Hill. So if it turned really heavy, I'd be against them. But I can see the angle. And if it became tactical, we have to think at the moment we've got around 14, 15 runners. We're probably going to have a field of 6 or 7 on the day. If this was a tactical race, she's got the gears. She's the one that would want. Harry Cobden would be quite happy if they're going a plod and it turns into a sprint from 4 out. In which case, she could well be a good bet in running, albeit that she's probably got £7 to £10 to find with either Time Hill or Paisley Park if they turn up at their best.
I'm looking at last year's winner, the World's End, and I've got down on my notes that this horse doesn't stand a chance. I had a brief conversation with you just before coming onto this podcast, and you have a completely different view to the World's End. Take that away.
Well, I wouldn't say a completely different view, but the World's End interests me at 20-1. Ollie Murphy is not having a good season, and I'm doing my best to avoid yards that are struggling. But in the last 14 days, he's picked up. He's had 7 winners from his last 42, 17% strike rate, which is the highest strike rate he's had in the entire calendar year. So they are finding form. Now, the World's End won this last year, which turned into a farce of a race. I'm sure people remember Paisley Park was pulled out. The World's End beat Lamy Serge, who must have been 1.0001 in running if the true odds were there. But Lamy Serge did what he always does, threw his head up in the air. I'm not going to win no matter what happens. So the World's End was a beneficiary. I was disappointed with the World's End. He ran in the French champion hurdle at Auteuil a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks back. I actually backed him that day thinking this is going to suit him perfectly. He had a really good record fresh. But when you actually look at it in hindsight, the World's End is not the best jumper in the world by any means. They have had a go chasing, it didn't work, and he does tend to clatter the hurdles. Now, when you do that at Auteuil with the fixed brush hurdles and the fixed bars, that's going to hurt, which is exactly what he did. He hit the second and the fourth, and he was out the race. But I can also forgive that because that French champion hurdle was a proper crawl. The first circuit was claiming hurdle pace. It was so slow. It became a sprint from 3 out, and the 3 horses who had form over 2 miles were the 1, 2, 3 in the finishing order. When you look at the other horses in that race, Ramses de Taille finished 6th in the race. He's come out and won a chase since. So I can kind of forgive that. The World's End was definitely not knocked about. The minute his chance was gone, they pulled him up. Let's not race it. And he does have good form on heavy ground at Ascot in December, which I think is key. 20-1 is probably a fair reflection of his chances, but I think he's got an each-way chance. John Joe O'Neill Jr. is a good booking. He is a 9-year-old, but he is my kind of angle into the race that actually, I may well, after this podcast, go and back him each way, because I think Paisley Park or Time Hill, if one of those didn't run or one of them didn't turn up, we might get a small field. The World's End is the one horse in here when I look for all the form, I thought, you know what, if it pours harder rain and it's 3 miles, he'll be quite happy with that because he is a one-paced horse. The issue with his jumping has never really been fixed. He broke my heart 3 years ago when he fell in the Albert Bartlett. I was on him at monumental prices and he was coming to win his race and he crashed through 2 out and went down. They've never really got to the point where he's a good hurdler. So he is one of those horses that he's going to clatter 1 or 2, which might cost him. But I think 20-1 underestimates him. I would rather back him at 20-1 than Thistlecrack, who's the same price at 20-1. There's much more value in the World's End.
We'll move swiftly on to Thistlecrack here. The old boy, what is he, 12 years old now? He's obviously not the soundest of horses. He's had his issues. He tends to have 300 days off and then a race and then 300 days off and a race. I imagine this will be the last season for him, if I'm honest with you. This would be some training performance if he was to go and win this. All his form is on good ground. So again, another possible non-runner. I imagine he obviously, as I said, wouldn't want it too soft. I would love to see him win this. But if he couldn't beat Paisley Park in that race at Newbury last year when getting £6, I'm guessing he has no chance of winning at all on level weights.
None at all. I don't lay horses at 20-1 because you can get your fingers burnt really quickly that way. But if you look at just the yard form alone, never mind whether Thistlecrack still has any ability left or not, Colin Tizard's horses are struggling and they're going out like light bulbs. I watched back of all the gin joints, who was the very short price favourite for the Grade 2 at Doncaster at the weekend, 4 furlongs out. Robbie Power pushes the button and the horse has got nothing left. Whether there's something wrong at the yard or not, I'm not sure. But Thistlecrack at the age of 12, rising 13, he's never run that well on heavy ground to make me think he's going to relish this kind of test. I'm quite surprised he's not in the King George. I thought they might roll the dice one more time because he has always run well around Kempton over the fences. But they've obviously decided just to keep him hurdling and see what ability's left. But I think you'd be a madman to take any kind of price about him for this race.
It's quite interesting. I think that would be a fantastic story to see him go back to the King George. Obviously, he won it a few years back, or I might have been 4 years back now, when he beat Q Card by a couple lengths, and he was, I believe, it was a novice or just turning from novice into open company. Brilliant. That would be a cracking story to see him go to the King George. Obviously not going to happen, but if he was to be pulled out, could be a possibility for the Tizard team.
It could be. People also forget that it's 2 years ago that he was 3 lengths second to Clanders Oboe in his first King George. And actually, Thistlecrack traded at odds on in running, jumping the second last, and just got done by Clanders Speed. So it's a bit of a surprise to me they haven't gone that route, whether they just want to see what's left. But like I said, I'm quite happy to let him run.
Anyone else in the field that you'd like to make a note for?
Just a couple to take a small poke at. The first thing I would say, there are 2 Irish runners, Cider Burley and the Jam Man. I'll be stunned if either of those turns up. They're not jocked up in the declarations. I can't imagine they're going to run. So when Cider Burley, who's around about 6-1 in the open markets, comes out, that's going to have quite a big effect on the pricing as well. There are just 2 really that I made small notes of. One is You Never Call for Kim Bailey. This was second in a Pertemps qualifier on the 9th of November at Kempton. Probably a bit like Main Fact. He's a handicapper who's rolling the dice to see if he's good enough to run in graded company. But he did run particularly well at Sandown around 18 months ago. And also that Pertemps race at Kempton is regularly targeted by Kim Bailey when he's trying to get one ready. A couple of years ago, the last Samurai came second in a Pertemps hurdle in that exact race at 50-1, and he went on to be beaten 2 lengths in the Beecher Chase. So I know the yard used that as a prep. He's probably got a bit to find, but he's the one pace angler in the race. David Bass is likely to throw him out in front as he does with a lot of theirs. And then the other one I just wanted to mention is the absolute rag of the field, Portrush Ted. He's around about a 50-1 point, which I think is a bit harsh, given that if you look at his form, yes, he fell at Haydock in February, but actually he's won his last 4 starts that he's actually completed. He won a handicap off a mark of 139 at Sandown on the 4th of December. They decided to roll the dice. The same owners have got the World's End, so I'd imagine they're both going to run. Warren Gatrix has said we may as well give him a go because he's gone up £4. He's now rated 144, so there's some definite value in 50-1, and we know he's going to run. If I was going to have a 50p each way silly bet in the race, it might be him because I think we haven't got to the bottom of him yet, and this is definitely going to be run to suit.
I want to chuck one out there that this weekend's probably not going to be his day, but there's definitely something, a race in their form. I'd like to give a small mention to third win for Huey Morrison. Now, he might not even run in the race this time around. He's not likely to get involved, but he is lightly raced, and he ran behind Main Fact the last day at Haydock. I think he was only beaten a couple of lengths and jumping the last hurdle. I mean, I was on him about 7-1, and I was sort of always counting my money, and then Main Fact sort of went past him on really desperate ground. He was 4th in last year's Pertemps, and that is some good form behind some classy horses. I just think off a mark currently of 144, I don't think it's competitive, so I don't imagine he'd go up for this. There's a possibility that they might go and sneak him in for a Pertemps and maybe go back, because that'd be just £3 higher than when running in it last year. I think Third Wind is one to keep on the right side for a handicap hurdle. We're going to look for a nap here. Who's your nap of the weekend going to be, Adam?
Well, my nap of the weekend also runs at Ascot in the 115, which is Caribbean Boy, trained by Nicky Henderson. Now, I despise putting up Nicky Henderson favourites as tips because I always seem to get the wrong side of the yard. But I couldn't help but be impressed. He won a 3-runner race at Newbury during the carnival meeting for the Ladbrokes Trophy. And normally with 3-runner races, you look at them and think, well, the form falls apart. And in the bare form, when you actually look at what was in behind him, he beat Fiddler on the Roof and Getaway Trump. Now, that isn't form to ever get excited about. But the time is, that 3-runner race where Caribbean Boy made most of the running was much faster than both Elusive Bell and Clondor Castle, who won handicaps on the same day. Caribbean Boy runs in this. This is a second season chase, graduation chase over 2 mile 5. Darryl Jacob takes the ride. He looks to me to be the obvious front runner in this field. I actually think he's got an outside chance of running in either the Marsh Chase or the RSA. I think Connections think he's that good. He just about qualifies. So for me, I think he's probably going to be around a 15-8 shot, and I expect him to get us off to a great start. 115 Ascot.
Fantastic jumper, isn't he? He only ran a couple of times over fences last year, and I'm pretty sure he beat the Big Bite around Newbury in a really good jumping display that time, and obviously backed that up again with a brilliant jumping display not that long ago again at Newbury. My nap is actually double entered at Haydock, so sort of taking a chance on him. He's in the 1150 and also the 205, and I'm hoping he goes to the 205, and that's Chitabalco. He is priced up at 10-1 for this race. Now, in the 2018 renewal of it, he finished 3rd off 147. He came back last year off a mark of 141 and finished 2nd. Now, this year, he's coming off 135. He is jocked up for that 1150 with a £6 claimer, Theo Gillard. But if he does go to this one, he gets jocked up with a £6 claimer, he's effectively be running off 129. They've taken more or less the same route this year as last year. They went to Foss last before winning at Bangor and then coming here. They've actually skipped Foss last this time and used that Bangor race as a prep run for it. So he's come in here after the run, so he should be absolutely cherry ripe for it. He will love the conditions. Heavy ground is his favourite. And I just hope he goes to the 205, really, because I think he's better over this distance. But at 10-1, I think that's a really fairly priced nap on a horse who loves conditions. All right, that is going to wrap up this episode of the Betting Heat. Adam, I don't know if you have anything to say at all.
No, just thanks for having me on, mate. Really enjoyed it. Hope we can find a winner this time.
Yeah, it was a difficult race last time, but I think we've covered all angles this time round. Anyway, guys, we'll catch you next week from the Betting Heat.